Everybody, thanks for joining us here at Sunnyside today. It's fruit tree class day, one of my favorites. I'm Trevor Cameron, our general manager here. Say hi to Nicole. She's back there
Morning.
with the pretty picture behind her. Mr. Smith is in the house again, the whistling gardener. Ask him some tough questions on chat, keep him on his toes. So thank you, Steve, for joining us as well. But like I said, this is one of my favorite classes of the year. We get to talk fruit here for about 45 minutes, hopefully. So just a reminder, we tape all these classes. So this will be recorded later this afternoon. It'll be posted on our YouTube channel. So you're more than welcome to go back and check on it as needed. I'm not doing a fancy PowerPoint today. We're just going to be chatting. So it won't be any slides to go back and look at, but we'll show you some products and hopefully teach you a little bit about growing fruit trees. So I wanted to mention, you'll see the sign next to me here. You know, Sunnyside's been here since 1948, an old community business, just like the Everett Clinic, kind of our neighbors here. They've been 90 years serving patients here in the Pacific Northwest. They're kind enough to sponsor our class. I want to say this up front. This is not a huge revenue stream for Sunnyside by any means, but I think it's a really cool deal for you, our local customers. Essentially, they're pitching in $5 $50 gift cards when they sponsor our classes, which we turn around and give out to 5 lucky winners here today from the class. We'll do that at the end, but that's essentially the sponsorship. So say hi to the doc over here. She gets to sit and look over my shoulder. We'll see how long she's much prettier than me, so you can look at her and listen to me. How's that? That sounds perfect. Mention the handout. Hopefully everybody got access to it. It's on the website. We can email it to you. But we're going to follow this kind of handout as we go through fruit discussion here today. I wanted to mention real quick, you know, back 2 weeks ago, we kind of tweaked our winter pruning class and we had our pruning for production class. We went through pruning fruit trees, pruning berries, a lot of edible things. This is a really tough class to get all this packed into one little session. So if you missed that, again, it's on our YouTube channel. You can go back and get a little help with pruning some old trees. You're more than welcome to ask some questions at the end if you missed it, but it certainly can be a lengthy discussion when we include pruning of all kinds of fruits. So you can go back and watch that last class as well. Okay. So if you kind of start out with the discussion here today, you know, Washington, that's my home state, so I'll say it's a great state. But we're interested in kind of up here in the Northwest where we have Western Washington and we got Eastern Washington, two totally different climates, which is a little unique in the United States. But certainly what we grow west of the Cascade Mountains here in our kind of wet, maritime, rainy climate is going to be much, much different than what folks grow east of the mountains. Washington's known for a huge amount of fruit production in Eastern Washington, not so much Western Washington. So the varieties we choose, the weather is going to dictate what we want to grow over here. We're not going to be able to grow a lot of the things you might find at the grocery store, certainly some of them, but we have other great varieties of apples and pears and cherries and all the things that we'll talk about today that will thrive here in our climate west of the Cascades. So we're really going to focus on that. When it comes down to it, really, there's two key things with fruit. We would call them heating units and chilling hours. You know, how long are we cold in the winter? How warm do we get in the summer to get these things ripened? So obviously Western Washington, though this year we've had quite a bit of chilling hours, typically doesn't have as much cold in the winter, nor as much heat in the summer. And again, that strictly dictates which varieties we choose and how successful we'll be growing certain things here in our little microclimate, okay? Now, one big thing, you know, if we talk about fruit, maybe you're buying some new ones, maybe you've got existing ones, we'll give you some kind of tips on both, but let's kind of pretend that you're interested in adding a fruit tree to your landscape, planting an orchard, you know, kind of growing your own. It's a huge craze right now in the garden industry. You know, siting your tree is huge. You know, we want sun. We're not going to have success growing fruit trees in shade or mostly shade. I would always say at least 6 hours of sun. And honestly, the more, the better, if we can get even more than that. So the first thing would be to choose a huge sunny location to allow them to grow. You know, spacing is a big one with me. You know, I'm not a big spray guy, don't like using chemicals. If we want our orchard or our fruit tree to be happy, we want air circulation and we want sunshine. So if we pack, little city backyard with 20 fruit trees that are planted 6, 8 feet apart, we're going to have problems down the road. We want to give these room to grow, and spread out. We always want a nice spreading type tree versus something going straight up. It's a little tougher to pick. So, if you're going to ask me, it depends on what tree you choose, but, I would try to leave at least 15, even 20 feet, between trunk to trunk as you set up your orchard, or multiple fruit trees, or maybe just adding 20 feet away from another tree in your yard that will get it good air, good sun, and get you some good quality fruit. Okay. Now up here, it's always about soils and drainage. We are wet in the wintertime, wet in the fall, wet in the spring, dry in the summer. Not a lot of trees are going to take heavy clay, poor drainage areas. We would need to amend those spots with compost, organic matter, make sure that we've got good drainage while we plant these creatures. Apples and pears maybe can take a little heavier soil, maybe a little easier if you're worried about maybe a little bit wetter ground in the winter. The peaches, the nectarines, apricots, cherries, plums, all the rest of those really need good drainage. If we've got too wet, water table comes up, we have heavy clay, we have drainage issues, we're going to have struggles with some of those other types of fruit trees. So make sure you've got adequate drainage as well. Now, a gentleman emailed this morning asking about fertilizer, and I'll mention it right now. Whether you have an existing tree or putting in a new tree, it's always good to use a nice organic fertilizer. My system would be this: if you've got a new tree, first of all, let's say you're putting in a new one, we're going to probably take a half a cup of a good organic EB Stones, the top of the line for organics, the fruit berry vine food. We're going to take about a half a cup of that and mix that in with our whole as we plant our new tree specimen. That's going to get the root system kicking, get it leafing out, getting it growing healthy. And I'm going to reapply a second dose, about a half a cup again, when we get into that mid-May, early June time frame. That's going to keep my tree happy through the seasons. We never want to fertilize late in the fall by any means. Certainly, if you really want to get it going, maybe a third dose in July will be fine. But we want to shut off this fertilizer as we get towards fall, let it go dormant, harden off, and then we'll start it up again next February, March. So if you have an existing tree, it's the same exact schedule. We would use a little more. If you look at that bag I just showed you, it's going to have some numbers on the back. How large is your tree? How many years has it been in the ground? And then we can put the appropriate amount down. So let's say we got the existing one. I'm guessing it's probably going to be a cup or two. If I've got my trunk, I'm never going to pile my fertilizer right up against the trunk. I want to go out a little ways and sprinkle that evenly around more towards the drip line or inside the drip line. That's going to be where the roots are going to be able to absorb that a little bit, and we'll have, again, a happy fruit tree going forward. If you want my opinion, I would not have grass up to my trunks. A lot of people do. You don't have to run out with the shovel and spade it all up. It would be better for the tree if you're starting to keep lawn at least in a 3-4 foot circle away from that trunk. Now I've got an area that I can apply the fertilizer. I can put some mulch down on there to keep my tree happy and focus my watering efforts in the summer on that specific thing. If we have lawn, grass is the greediest creature in our yard. Grass is going to take all that fertilizer we put down. So if you've got lawn up to the tree, we would need to apply more of that fertilizer, probably double the dose. The grass is going to get some, and then the rest would dissipate down into the soil structure, and the fruit tree would take advantage of that. Okay. So just remember, if you're starting from scratch, I would try to keep a good 3-4 foot circle with no turf around the base of my fruit trees. If you've already got it on there and you're like, he's crazy, I'm not going to go dig it up, then just use a little more fertilizer, and I think we'll be happy campers. Part of that discussion too is going to be what you put on your lawn. I want organic on anything I'm putting in my body that I'm growing for edible. So we want to make sure we use an organic lawn food in those adjacent areas, not weed and feed, not herbicides, nothing chemical that might, again, chance to get into our tree system, damage the tree, get into the fruit, and perhaps cause issues down the road. Okay. So drainage and fertilizing, you got covered. Second part of that is dormant spraying. Now, I brought in both just to kind of show you what we do here. Here's your liquid cop and here's your horticultural oil, organic, OMRI listed horticultural oil. Natural copper, liquid cop, is an ammonium copper complex. Now, they can't call this organic. It doesn't have carbon, but the only issue with copper is like marine invertebrates. So if I live right on the sound, right on a creek, right on a river, right on a lake, I'd be a little more leery of getting copper. We would choose a different fungicide. But a typical yard, those are both very, very safe to use and a great way to get ahead on your fruit trees. If you had any problems with them last year, you want to prevent issues from getting on this year. We want to clean up all the stuff from the last season, mummified fruit, old leaves, keep the base clear. And at some point here before we bloom, it doesn't need to be today, tomorrow, in a week, but probably you've got about a month where we would want to get those sprays. We can mix those both in the same spray container, apply that to my fruit and a lot of other things in my yard, and ensure that I'm going to start the season clean. So the copper is a great way to control fungus. The horticultural oil would be a great way to get rid of a lot of the insect issues that perhaps I would have, okay? So try those dormant sprays would be a great way to go if you want to get ahead. I can also use those for a little bit of spraying in season as well, okay? Now, next, we'll just kind of talk about maybe we'll call it the anatomy of a fruit tree. I got the doc back here from Everett Clinic, so I might as well call it the anatomy of a fruit tree. Give me 1 second. I'm going to grab it here. Laugh if you saw me because I just yanked it out of the pot because we do bare root fruit trees. So if I pull this, I'll get my computer cord. You know, I pull this tree up, there's your whole tree system there. I got a wet, muddy root system, okay? I've got a graft where our grower, local here in Skagit County, has grafted the tree that I want onto the appropriate root system. I've got my stem, and then up goes my branches, okay? So this is an apple. It really doesn't matter. You'll see the same structure with all of our trees. But if I look at a tree like that, I can't sit and hold this. If I look at a tree like that, you know, the most important thing is noticing where that graft is. If we bury that graft and we plant it, we're not going to have success growing our tree. I've had a few people every year that think if I just bury the trunk in the ground, then that tree will stay smaller. That is not the case. We want to make sure that graft is out of the ground and is never buried by mulch, soil, anything like that. We have to keep that up out of the ground, okay? The biggest thing for us at a nursery at Sunnyside is the rootstock. You know, that is what is telling your tree how big it's going to grow. So all the fruit trees are grafted. We're not doing old Johnny Appleseed 50-foot apple trees, standard trees, even very few semi-dwarf. What you would find at Sunnyside are dwarf on the majority of our things, and even a few mini dwarf trees in the case of apples only. So we want a tree that's going to grow 10, 12, maybe 15 feet, stay very manageable in size without overpowering our yard and causing us to prune too much. So just keep in mind kind of that basic structure. The genetics and the rootstock mean everything. So we select the best of the best, you know, for our customers that are going to keep our trees healthy, let them grow in our climate, and stay a little bit more manageable in a typical garden situation, okay? Now, one thing, we'll go through specific fruits here, but one big thing that might get a little confusing, I don't know if you read Steve's article this week we put out from the Whistler on kind of how fruit trees are pollinated and the different ways that maybe they're not getting pollinated. You know, this is a little confusing sometimes to gardeners when we talk about cross-pollination, what's self-fertile, what kind of bee do I need, all the rest of this. You know, I feel your pain. Sometimes it's a little overwhelming to kind of figure out what you need to have in the yard to ensure that you have success. So really pay attention as we talk about specific fruits here, and always ask when you're down here, is this tree going to be self-fertile? I have another one. Will this one work with it? Because again, we want to get a tree for you to have garden success. We don't need you calling in 2 years saying, yeah, that apple tree you bought me blooms every year and I never get anything on it. Now what do I do? You know, so, you know, be honest up front. What do you have in your yard? What does your neighbor maybe have? Do we need to have 2 trees to kind of cross-pollinate each other? And then we have success on both of them that way, okay? So a lot of things will be self-fertile. I can plant 1 tree, walk away. I'm done. The bees go from blossom to blossom on that particular tree, and I've got fruit production. Other things, I have to have 2 different varieties, not the same. The bees will go back and forth between the 2 trees. Now I have fruit on both. Now up here in our climate, the magic word is the mason bee, the blue mason bee, the orchard mason bee, whatever you want to call it. But the mason bee is the key. That's the one native bee that is out in this colder weather in February, early March, that is going to buzz around and pollinate our tree for us. You know, we won't spend a lot of time. You can ask some questions after the class about, you know, how to have mason bees. We have hives. We'll have bees here in a couple weeks. We'll have all the supplies you need if you want to add a little hive. They look like flies. They don't look like bees. They don't sting people. But if you think of bees, you know, I think everybody watches the news. It's a tough world for bees out there these days, and we want to try to protect our native pollinators. If we have a place they can hang out in our specific landscape, in our orchard, you're always going to have the best pollination on your fruit. And it's not just that, it's berries, it's everything here as we go through spring. So remember that little creature, the mason bee. That's a great one to think of today, okay? Now, the disease resistance and genetics, you know, that's kind of the next step there. You know, as we, you know, I'll speak for myself, as I look at trees we should bring in here year to year and a new variety. Should we get rid of this? Should we add a new one here? You know, it's all about disease resistance and the genetics to me. Is it a superior variety to an older one? Is it new and fresh? Is it easier to grow? You know, all the typical things that you would want as a home gardener. That's what we try to evaluate here at the nursery on what we want to carry that's new. Is it new and exciting? Is it just a craze? Is it really not going to grow here? You know, when you come to Sunnyside, you know, you're not going to find Eastern Washington fruit trees. Certainly some will thrive over there just as well as they will here, but we're going to avoid a lot of those disease-prone ones and things, again, that would be more for Eastern Washington and not Western Washington, okay? You know, the breeders keep breeding. Every year there's going to be new. I know up at the research station, they're working on new peaches for our climate, you know, and there's always somebody trying to make something new. It goes through evaluation. We see how it does. Do I have to spray it 80 times a year? Does it do well on its own? I mean, there's a lot of factors that go into the decision, but, you know, rest assured, the point is, you know, Sunnyside to me has the best of the best. We're going to have the local varieties, what works for you, and is a little bit easier to grow in your home landscape. Now, if we, you know, we mentioned fertilizing yearly, you know, again, that February, May, June, maybe midsummer again, if you really want to get it going. That's for new trees and old. Just dictates how much you put down with how big that tree is. You know, one thing would be watering. You know, really watch the water. It's not that we have to worry about this so much, probably September to May, but we have very Mediterranean summers here, you know, and if I want big, juicy, delicious fruit, I cannot let my trees get drought stressed. You know, new ones, you know, I don't know your soil. It's a tough one to tell you how much to water, but, you know, try to check it a couple times a week. If it's mulched properly, we would always rather have you water it very deeply, less often, develop a deep root system and not something very shallow. If it's an old tree, it's been on the ground for 30 years, you know, probably doesn't need a whole bunch, but maybe I'm out working in June, July, August, and I'm out weeding for a little bit. I turn my hose on a trickle or get a soaker hose. Maybe I saturate that tree root zone, you know, once or twice a month to make sure that I'm not drought stressed and I get my good production. If I'm a plant, the first thing I'm always going to sacrifice is my production. So if I get drought stressed in July and I'm a little apple tree growing in your front yard, I'm going to drop my fruit first. Then I'm going to drop my foliage and try to go dormant to save myself for the next season. So if that's something that's maybe been happening to you, that might be the culprit. It's not every day, it's not every week probably on an old tree, but a little bit of irrigation will probably help you get a delicious crop for the fall, okay? All right, there's phase one. We made it through the first section. So let's start diving in. I told Nicole I would drink water today. It's awful dry in here. But we're going to start talking about a little bit more specific fruit now, okay? So if we kind of look at the first section there, you know, apples, pears, Asian pears, you know, these are what we would call the spur fruits. So if you watched that video from a couple weeks ago, we kind of went through pruning and how spurs develop. But essentially, we're selecting a plant. All three of those always need to have two varieties to cross-pollinate. I need two apples that are different to shed pollen, and I get fruit on both. I need two pears to do the same thing. Yes, Asian pear, European pear will cross together. That's a common question that probably somebody already typed in for Steve. We can do European and Asian together is another one that works as well. The fun thing, probably with apples, again, there's always good old tried and true varieties. We carry some of those. And there's some fun new ones too. Probably for us, Cosmic Crisp is a Washington only apple. So if you're not from around here, sorry, you can't have any. Cosmic Crisp is one. Sunrise Magic is another really fun one for Washington only. Honey Crisp. Those are probably our three most popular sellers, but we have a lot of other good choices, whether you're looking for desserts, baking, fresh eating. I like it a little tart. She likes it a little mushy. You're going to find a good apple for your own personal taste, but just keep in mind, you have to have two different apples to cross-pollinate, okay? The same with the pears. European pears are going to have that longer neck. We've got a great selection of those to cross-pollinate as well. And then Asian pear apples, Oriental pears, they got too many names, but those will be more round, kind of the shape of an apple, but more of the texture of a pear, really juicy, tend to be super sweet. But again, I have to have two different varieties. In the pear world, kind of the fun ones to me, you'll see I listed there are Ready Robin and Maxi. Those are two more and more people are picking up on that are actually crosses of both of those pears. So that's why we can kind of mess with the genetics of the Asian pear, the European pear. Those varieties would have traits of both. So look like kind of an Asian pear, but even more with the texture and the taste of a European type pear. They're pretty fun to grow too, and pretty easy as well, okay? So just remember the pollination on those. On apples in particular, for us, we get whatever we can, and sometimes at the last minute, we don't have the dwarf, we have to get a semi. But I think on apple this year, I don't think there's any semi back there at all. It's all dwarf and mini dwarf. So whether you want, mini dwarf apples are going to probably be in the 10-foot tall range. If I buy a dwarf one, maybe 12 or 15. It really depends on your pruning. And again, I'd refer you back to that video. Our family had mini dwarf apples grown for 30 years in Cle Elum, and I could have drawn little 8 or 10-foot circles around all of them, and we got huge production, but we pruned properly. So you can keep those very small and only have to get a little 2-step ladder to pick your fruit instead of climbing up 20 feet in the air. If you look at most of the production or the orchards, that's what they're doing now. They can keep their trees very small, almost an espalier type situation, which we'll look at here in a minute, and I can get maximum production on a very small tree going forward, okay? Now, the last thing I'll mention with apples and pears, let me see how we're doing can time, is maybe just a couple of disease and bug things to look for. I can't possibly go through all this in a class for everything. You can certainly ask questions after, come down and talk to me or the staff. We'll help you with maybe an issue you had. But for me, the most common thing I would see on an apple would be scab. If I got an apple that's got those little scabby circles on it, I could peel it right off and eat it. It doesn't affect the eating quality at all, but they kind of look not so good. So scab will get on the foliage and on the fruit. If you've been fighting that, that's a disease. We need to get a fungicide on there. Better air, better pruning, more sun, all those things we've been talking about will help. But if I keep up on scab, we can keep it to a minimum. And again, it doesn't ruin the fruit. That's the big thing. Most people look at it and go, I don't want any of that. Well, sweet, peel them, make some applesauce, take the skin off where it's bad, slice them up, eat them. There's nothing wrong with them. You just probably don't want to bite into that brown scab part of the skin. How's that? For apples and bugs, I'll just mention one, and that's apple maggot. A lot of folks in all of Washington and other areas fight apple maggot, and that's an evil little creature that's pretty tough to get rid of. She flies in, lays her eggs in your skin, and now I have that brown spot. But if I cut that apple in half and open it up, I can see the brown tunnel going to the center, and I'll find that nasty little worm in the middle, the larva that is reproducing for the next generation. So that we don't want to eat. If we've got apple maggot, we want to get rid of that and try. We would hang a pheromone trap. Let's start with this. If we're doing apple maggot, oil, number one. I showed you that horticultural oil. Let's get that on there as a dormant spray here to make sure we don't have any larvae eggs hanging out in our wood, buds, anywhere. I want all the debris cleaned up on the ground, old fruit, rotten fruit, hanging fruit from branches, get rid of all of it. Get a dormant spray on there after you prune. Now we go into spring and we're okay. You know, she will start flying around and laying eggs in my apples when they get probably nickel size. You know, we're talking like a mid-April, you know, early May thing. So if I hang traps, a pheromone trap out, I can hopefully catch most of those flies. Otherwise, there's really nothing I can spray with. I can't spray my fruit with a systemic to kill the larva or the fly, because then I'll be eating the systemic. We don't want to get poisoned. So we got to try the pheromone trap would be the way to go. We'll have some of those in here pretty quick when it's time to start hanging them outside, okay? On the pears, the one thing we would say with the pears is probably the rust or blister mite. If you've got pear and you walk out there and you see the foliage with all the little blisters on it or orange spotting, those tend to be the most common things I see go wrong with pears up here. It's not the plague, it's not going to kill your tree, but it's going to cause some defoliation. And if we don't take care of the blight, pear blight, that perhaps might get on my fruit and I might turn black and rot and lose a little bit of my crop. So again, something like the copper fungicide will help with that. The hard part in our specific area in Western Washington is that rust is an alternate host plant between Western red cedar and the pear tree. And it just blows in the wind and the rain and gets right back on my tree. So if you live in a, you know, woodsy area with Western red cedars, you're probably going to struggle a little bit more with the rust. And we need to keep up on the spray. If you don't have cedars around, then probably look across the fence or down the road. There's one that is probably sporing out. It doesn't affect the cedar tree, and then it blows in the wind and gets right back on your foliage when it comes out come springtime, okay? So there's a little bit on the pears and apples. Cherries, you know, is one we carry quite a bit of, and all of our cherries are going to be a dwarf. They call it the Gisela rootstock. That was a revelation, you know, going back 15, 20 years ago, and we could keep a cherry very manageable in size. Almost every orchard I know that grows these professionally uses that same rootstock, heavy producing on cherries, and a much smaller plant for homeowners. They can keep it manageable size in a yard. Now, keep in mind with cherries, you know, the vast majority of cherries we carry are self-fertile. So we go back to the beginning and kind of knowing, I'm trying, Nicole, and we're kind of knowing that we got a self-fertile cherry. I can plant the one tree, let the little mason bee do its thing, and I've got a happy cherry. I'm going to have a good crop on my own if I can keep the birds from probably borrowing a couple. But we got self-fertile majority. The one cherry that we stock, and it's probably the most popular one, is Rainier. If I get a Rainier cherry, I want to have a second cherry to maximize my crop, okay? So again, when you come down, ask the staff, we'll show you. The vast majority would be self-fertile, but there are a couple out there that we would want to have a cross-pollination to maximize our production, okay? Now, like I said, we do all Gisela rootstocks here. You know, we've kind of kept the same, I think, a really nice mix of cherries over here. Our issue, again, is the wet spring, maybe not as much heat in the summer. They'll ripen a little bit later. And I'm always kind of worrying about more of the crack problems over here, not ripening. You know, the birds, I kind of smile as I chuckle and say, you can do what you like to try to battle that. We've tried a number of things personally to keep the birds from taking all of them. I don't mind sharing, just don't take them all. You know, those are the kinds of things you probably trial and error. We've done, you know, hanging little old computer discs with the color flash. They got flash tape that flashes color. Some of it works for a while, some of it doesn't work so well. We'll see how smart the birds are in your yard. Or try something to try to keep them out of there. So if you were going to try a couple, I mean, if I was to drop a couple cherry names for you, you know, look at Glacier. That's a really nice dark one, kind of like Bing, but better for Western Washington, to be honest, than Bing is. Glacier is a great one. Lappin's is a nice red self-fertile cherry. I like a couple of the newer ones from the East Coast, Black Gold. We don't have a lot of those, but that's an excellent one. I've had pretty good luck with hearing from customers. And a new one I'm trying, Tyrannovie. That's one that we're trying out this year for the first time. And I'm hearing again, another really good kind of wet tolerant for Western Washington, and a really good, excellent sweet cherry that's self-fertile, okay? Now, a couple of other things on other cherries. Now, pie cherry, I like me some cherry pie. I'm sure there's others in there who like some cherry pie. Cherry pie cherries are always self-fertile. So I don't need to worry about, we carry Montmorency, we got some old school, we got Surefire, we got some new school. You know, you can get a good pie cherry and have kind of the sweet and sour cherry. I don't even mind eating the sour cherries. They're pretty tasty still, but that's what we would do with the pie. Just keep in mind, that's an excellent way to get pollinators in your yard. You know, we keep mentioning mason bee, mason bee, mason bee. You know, that's a way. A pie cherry is always going to bloom really heavy early. And if you've got the room, that's a great addition. Even if you don't like cherry pie, you know, keep the bees happy, get them active in your landscape. Now they'll go find the pears, the apples, the peach, and everything else. And we'll have excellent production again too. Okay. So keep in mind on pie cherries. The last one there, you'll see our bush cherries. Now ours are not here quite yet. I'm sorry. We're still waiting for our bare root to come boxed here in the mail, believe it or not. We will have them here pretty quick. But if you look at those, you know, Carmine Jewel, Juliet, Romeo, Crimson Passion is the latest one. We would have some of those available on what they would call own root. Those are not grafted, but they're grown on their own roots. So now I have 3-4 trunks, and I grow my cherry like a little small shrub. You know, these are plants that bloom a little bit later. They ripen a little bit later in summer. I think they're a little better disease resistance up here because they bloom later, but they're just smaller plants. And if you want a good quality with really high sugar content, those are all excellent ones that we could even grow in a whiskey barrel, you know, a large planter on the deck, you know, next to the hot tub. You can sit there and pick some cherries midsummer, you know, anywhere that we don't have room, maybe for a large scale tree. Sometimes those bush cherries are a great option for you as well. Okay. Now, real quick, you know, common issues for cherries, you know, I would put at the top of the list what we call brown rot or blossom blight. That's the same disease. If I had a flowering cherry, they'd call it blossom blight because I don't get fruit, I'd lose the blossoms. If I have a fruiting cherry, they would call brown rot because it would lose the blossom and my fruit would drop and rot. You know, that's a prevalent problem up here in some locations. If again, the sun, the air is not quite moving, we're not going to have as best of luck keeping blossom blight or brown rot out. That's a fungal disease that blows in the wind and the rain and infects my flower. So the cherry would open, you'd look out and see all your beautiful white, light pink flowers coming on. It blows in, infects the blossom, and you go out 2 days later and you're like, oh, why are all my blooms turning brown? It's probably blossom blight. You know, even though unless we get super cold, you know, on an unlucky day and frost them all, it's probably you got a little blossom blight in. And again, the copper that I mentioned will help with that. A dormant spray will help with that. And again, we would spray it before flowering, let the blooms open, let the little mason bees do their thing. And once we have petal drop on the ground and the bees are done pollinating, we could go ahead and hit it again. You know, that would be kind of one of those, maybe every 30 days here in the wet weather might help keep our cherry a little bit cleaner. Okay. Now the big last section there, you know, I kind of threw peaches, apricots, nectarines, plums, kind of all those types of fruit with the pit in the middle, right? We put those kind of all together there because we would treat them very similarly in our landscape. So if we kind of take peach, number one, you know, I would never try to grow any peach here in Western Washington except for frost peach. You know, we sell about 100 a year. It's the most popular fruit tree. You know, I'm going to be brutally honest. It's a little bit more of a labor of love to grow a peach here in Western Washington. We're wet, you know, rainy. We really need to prune. We need to prune a peach every single season before it blooms, and we need to spray. If we don't spray, I can guarantee you at some point you're going to get peach leaf curl and affect the quality of your tree. So try to keep up on noticing what's going on. And honestly, that's peach, nectarine, and apricot. But really watch those peach trees. A lot of people growing them, and you can grow them very successfully. This is a tree that was found out in Granite Falls locally here, growing successfully. I've had one growing up. I've had one since. We had one on the property here for a while. You can get excellent peaches on it, but I just want you to be honest with yourself as a home orchardist, we'll call you. If you're not going to spray and you're not going to put in a little bit of pruning, probably do something a little bit easier than peach. That's going to be a little bit more work to keep them healthy and producing right. Like I said, the same thing with the apricot. You know, we carry a couple of excellent varieties here that are the best for Western Washington. Puget Gold is one. The other one is Harglow, which they say, again, is a little bit more even disease resistant than old Puget Gold. You can grow both those very successfully here in our climate. It's just, again, making sure they get pruned properly every year before they bloom, and making sure we get a little bit of spray on them will keep them that way going long term. Okay. Nectarine, same exact story. I won't say it again, but the variety I would try is the only one we carry is Hardy Red. You know, those are to me the three types of fruit: the peach, the apricot, the nectarine. I go to my local grocery store or produce market. You know, I'm gonna find Tilton this, and you know, Moore Park this, and Wenatchee this, and all these varieties that again come from the other side of the mountains where it's very hot and very dry, and they're not fighting the disease issues as much. So you will struggle to grow those varieties over here. Stick with the best of the best for Western Washington, which is what we have here at Sunnyside. Okay. If I, you know, I mentioned a couple things kind of what, oh, I always forget plums. We got to mention plums. Now, we get a lot of plums back there in the nursery. And if you came down here to shop, you know, you would see them in two blocks. We have European plums. You could call them plum prunes, whatever you want, but I'm going to have more of that oblong shape to them, oval shape. Those are my European plums, and those are all self-fertile. I want to make sure that's clear. The plum is probably the hardest one to keep straight, but European is always self-fertile. So I can buy one Italian plum, one yellow egg plum, one Imperial Epinus. I can pick a good European plum, plant a single tree, and have all I want on it. I don't need to worry about planting a second variety. If I want Japanese type plums, the big round juicy ones, I have to have two different ones. So you come down, pick out a Shiro and a Satsuma, or a Beauty and a Shiro. You've got to get two different varieties of those so it sit together in your yard and cross-pollinate. Now I have fruit on both of them, okay? So keep in mind with the plums, ask if you don't remember. It's me or the staff are always here. We can show you, oh, you've got room for one tree. Let's do a European plum, get you what you want and not have to worry about two. If you've got room, you know, grab two Japanese and let them cross-pollinate, make friends, and you've got lots of good quality plums to eat in the summer, okay? Now, all those we do carry on dwarf rootstock. So I don't think we got subbed any semi-dwarf. If you have a little more room, you know, I think we got a few semi-dwarf peaches back there, but I think almost all of our plums came in on dwarf rootstock. So again, a little bit more manageable in size. I'm going to, you know, pause for a second here and kind of divert to two other topics. And I'm sure maybe somebody's already asked Steve, but you know, one thing is going to come up, whether it's the plum, the apple, the pear, all these things we've talked about, that we have to have two different varieties to cross-pollinate to get success on both. How close do I have to plant them? Where do I put them in my yard? You know, we could ask questions like that, you know, till we're blue in the face. I've always said, you know, obviously side by side, there's never going to be a substitute for that. I've got a happy bee that can just buzz back and forth and pollinate my tree for me. It doesn't need to be side by side necessarily, but I would not go more than 100 feet if you ask me, and I would not go one side of a house or a structure to another. I want to stay on the same sunny south side of the yard and be able to have those bees buzz between tree to have happy pollination. Okay. The other thing I want to bring up real quick is, you know, again, I hope we're not confused with this cross-pollination and self-fertile and what does a bee do and how do I get my fruit? You know, it's an overwhelming subject sometimes. If you don't have room, you know, don't force it. You know, if you've got a small yard and you want a variety of fruit in there, You know, don't try to pack 20 trees in a little 50-foot area. You're going to struggle in a couple of years and you will not be able to keep them pruned, separated, and happy. You know, look at something like combination fruit. You know, that's something where we buy in, they're a little bit more expensive, but, you know, take apple, for example. I can pull one over here. I put it one step too far away. You know, this is an apple tree here that I brought in that we would call a combination apple. We have combo cherries, we have combo pears, we have combo Asian pears. Now I have one trunk that our grower has grafted 4 or 5 varieties of that fruit on there for me. Now I can plant one tree, the bee goes branch to branch, and I've got happy apples, I've got pears, I've got Asian pears, and I don't have to worry about planting 2 varieties. We carry a lot of combination fruit here, and that's a great way for a homeowner to get a nice mix. You know, maybe I've had a lot of customers say, well, I love Honeycrisp. I bought a Honeycrisp tree and then I got a combo apple. Now I have a mix of some different apples I can utilize on my combo, and it pollinates my Honeycrisp for me. Maybe that is an example, you know, kind of as a homeowner. But consider combination as an option. We don't do plum combination. I personally think they're a mess when you mix European and Japanese together. One grows fast, one grows slow. I've seen like lopsided trees in yards from combo plums that I just think they're a tougher way to go. Cherries are really easy as well. You know, but consider that as an option. Those multiple graft combination type fruits is an easy way to get you a nice variety, a nice way to get pollinated by those mason bees, okay? The other option is espalier. I don't know if I can reach this one. You can see the top of it here, where literally that branch, instead of going up like a tree, I'm going horizontal along a fence. Now, again, I think a really good option for a lot of homeowners, whether you have a small or big yard, everybody's got a sunny fence, you know, or everybody's got a spot they could train this out kind of as a living fence, you know, quote unquote. You know, espalier is a way where I've got 3 tiers, typically 3 different varieties of fruit on there: apples, pears, Asian pears. Again, we don't do cherry or plum, but it's a great way I can train my tree totally horizontally, not take up the sun, not grow up so much, and go horizontal along a fence or a support structure. You know, I would invite you when you're down, ask me or the staff, we'll show you. You know, Steve put in a couple of beautiful pear espaliers years and years ago. We have them in a couple gardens here right by our entrance. You know, they stay very tidy. We prune them a couple times a year, yes, to keep them small, but we get great production on a very small area. You know, I mentioned this earlier, that to me is what most commercial growers are doing now. It may not be trained on a cedar fence or a galvanized fence, but they're putting logs up and training their trees to grow like that, because again, now I've got flat growth, I get even sun exposure. I'm going to have great production and not eat up my whole yard with a bunch of trees. So think about espalier. That's a really fun way, I think, to grow some of those spur fruits in particular. Again, the apples, the European pears, or those Asian pears. We got a great selection of espaliers in right now as well. Okay. Now, I'm probably getting close here. I'm about out of time. So I'm going to mention just a few things real quick that probably are not here yet. You know, we were able to plant, again, from our local Western Washington grower here. The majority of our fruit trees come in really early January. They're all here ready to go. You know, we pop them in our custom soil in a 15-gallon, put them out there. You come down here and we take them out of the pot. You take them home bare root. So that's the way we kind of do bare root here. When we're done with bare root, they start leafing out. Then we have to leave them in the pots, and you take the tree home as soil. So some things that we haven't mentioned, like filberts, almonds, walnuts. We have some nuts around. I hate to say, I think somebody already cleaned us out of all the almonds and the walnuts, but we do have some great filberts back there. The one thing I would mention with filbert trees, again, is disease. And filbert blight with our native filberts, the Western hazelnuts, pretty tough if you live out in the woods a little more. You're going to struggle growing filberts. The stuff we carry is disease immune. This is straight out of Oregon State University, where we don't have to worry about ever getting infected with filbert blight. So if you like to feed the squirrels, you like a little bit of nuts for yourself, there's some excellent hazelnuts back there, or filbert nuts that you can still grow, okay? Figs, there's not a lot of figs in yet. You know, if I kind of put figs, persimmons, you know, kind of those warmer type fruits, we won't have those till a little bit later. So I apologize. We try to do some of that stuff bare root. It just isn't going to happen anymore. There's nobody really doing bare root on either of those. So we buy those in grown. I'm thinking more towards like early April, we would start to have some of that in. You're more than welcome to email, leave your name when you're here on our wish list. We'll let you know as that stuff arrives a little bit later in spring. You know, typically we try to get all we can, and persimmon is probably the hardest one these days. We have American, Russian, and some Asian type persimmons on order. I got both my fingers crossed and my toes crossed that you can't see. We'll hope they get here at some point, but I'm thinking it won't be till about April, okay? Let's see, what do we got left here, Nicole? Tie up some loose ends, right? So, you know, with our classes always here at Sunnyside, you know, we've always been real generous, I think, with our local customers. You know, we're trying to hopefully teach you a few things. Hopefully I taught you some fruit goodies today. You come down here, do a little bit of shopping, get some things for your yard. Both the dormant sprays I mentioned, if you haven't gotten them yet, come down and get them, 20% off. Again, these can be mixed right in the same spray container, make your life easy, and I can fight disease and insect. So both that organic horticultural oil and the liquid cop, 20% off. You know, we've been partners here for my 12 years here now with EB Stone. I think it's the best organic company on anywhere in the U.S., but certainly on the West Coast. We get all of our soils, amendments, fertilizers. Again, if we're growing something, go green, make it natural, use organics. Both the sizes of the fruit tree fertilizer, 20% off. This is the full. It's got a little Ziploc pouch on there. You can even close it and save it for later. Maybe you've got a few fruit trees. This is a popular purchase at 20% off. You got your 15-pounder here. So if I've got a number of trees, or you're like me and you want to stash in the garage, I got buy the bag. It's a little cheaper. I can always seal it up and have it year to year. That fertilizer never goes bad. So take advantage of the 20% off on that. The last one is the fruit trees themselves. So if you come down, excuse me, and want to do some shopping, you know, all the trees are 30% off if you take them bare root. You saw me, I'll pick it back up here. He's like, what did that man do on the Zoom class? He ripped a tree out of the pot. You know, this is what you will take home. You know, this is the bare root tree. We soak it in our little special water solution back there. We put it in a plastic bag, say, here you go, have fun. And you take it home, dig a hole, add some compost, put your food in and plant it. I want to make sure this point is loud and clear. You know, I can't come down here and say, hey, Trev, I'm here to get a couple bare root trees today. Sweet, let's get you all set up. I'm going to always ask you, and we try to get our staff to ask you, hey, when are you going to plant these? You know, this isn't something I can take home and throw in my garage and throw out behind the house and come back in a week and put in the ground. If I'm taking a bare root tree home, it's going in the ground today. I don't want those roots to dry out at all. If you take it home and you're like, life came up, I can't do it today, I was going to, something came up, I got to run, lay it on the ground somewhere in the garden, take a shovel and bury the roots. Just make sure they're not exposed to open air. And I've got that tree that's going to be wet, it's going to be safe, and then I can plant it when I have some time. So keep in mind, bare root, be ready to rock. You know, if it was me, I'd go whole dug. I got all my spots ready to go. I got my list. Trevor said buy a peep. Trevor said buy this. You come down here, we get you a bunch of bare root trees. You go home, pop them in the ground, you're done. Off we go for the season, okay? Sometimes, depending on where you live, if you're windy, maybe you stake them, you know, to get them not going nice and straight. Look at a stake system or a simple stake before they get their root system going. You know, you look at that root system there like, well, that's really going to do anything? I think you would be shocked, you know, in those 15-gallon pots in about 4 months, they would be totally filled with the root of every single one of the trees that we talked about today. So it'll establish in your garden very quickly. And just to make sure you were listening earlier, don't bury the graft. That's one of my pet peeves. Everybody comes back, what happened to my tree? You buried the graft. We got to keep that graft out of the ground, okay? So there's some sales. If you're not tired of listening to me sitting here yelling at you about fruit trees, I'm back in 2 weeks for 2 more of my favorite classes. So Saturday the 12th is berry class. We'll be talking about everything edible berries. And Sunday the 13th, we always do it by Valentine's Day, rose class. We get to talk roses. So instead of buying your sweetie a dozen roses, buy her a rose bush that you can grow in the yard. Now you got fresh roses all through the summer, right? So we'll do berries and roses in 2 weeks. I'll be back doing both of those. All right. So I just want to say here before we get into the fun part, giving away some sponsorship money from Ever Clinic. You know, thanks to the Ever Clinic for sponsoring the class. You know, they're going to do this kind of once a month for us on some of our more popular ones. And I think it's a great thing for our local customers to be able to win some Sunnyside money to come down here and spend. You know, not only do they provide quality family care, specialty care, surgical care, and urgent care in all their clinics. I got about 5 by my house in Everett. You know, they're allowing us to do this, kind of give away $5 $50 gift cards at this class. I'll give you a preview at the berry class. We'll be doing the same thing. So that's kind of fun. You know, what we're going to do is I'm going to pose a question to see if you were listening here in the class. And we're not going to make it a techie, whoever types the fastest. So you have to enter the right answer in your chat line. And Miss Nicole back there is going to select 5 random winners of the $50 gift cards today. And then we'll let you know who won and go from there. So I tried to make this question easy, but we'll see if you were listening here. So the question is this: what type of bee pollinates the vast majority of our fruit trees here in Western Washington? So there's your question. Speed type. Come on, let's go and get it in there real quick. It's probably just got 150 of them right now. You got to pick 5. So again, thank you very much to Ever Clinic. You can see their banner here. It'll be up for all the classes that we do with them sponsoring. I get to say hi to the doc here again. She is definitely much cuter than me. So we've got our banner up. Ever Clinic's here. And again, thanks for joining us today. We'll hopefully see you in 2 weeks out there. But I'm going to let Nicole see if is there any questions left after Mr. Smith got them all?
Yeah, we have a few. Let me tell you, it was so great. You guys didn't even let Trevor finish that question before you guys were just flooding. Yeah. And yeah, pretty much
they were listening.
Everybody that answered, you guys all nailed it. Yes, Mason bee is the correct answer. Orchard Mason, there's a lot of different names, but everybody nailed it. So great job. There was like 50 of you that commented right away and you were super fast. So good job. So I'm going to pick 5 random winners. So I'll let you know in this chat if you're one of the winners. But we do have some questions. You've been asking a lot of really good ones, and Steve's been really quick, trying fast fingers to get them all. As always, if you have specific issues with, trees that aren't producing fruit, or there's certain disease or whatever that's specific to your situation, take a few pictures, send them over, or let us know some more detail in an email. That way Trevor can talk with you specifically about what's going on in your case, in your yard, instead of kind of generalities, because it's hard to always know, and we're happy to help in those specific cases. So shoot us an email, that way we can kind of address what's going on with you. We've got some questions about figs. You kind of talked about them, but there was some questions about, can you talk more, a little more in depth about the growing, the care, the water of figs?
That's a great topic, because again, a lot of people, I've been doing this 30 years, and I don't even know if I sold 10 figs in 15 years, and now all of a sudden everybody wants to grow a fig up here. Call it global warming, but they're plenty hardy. Even with our cold winter, most figs will be fine through the winter. The key with fig, honestly, is sunshine. You can call it 1 word, 2 words, whatever you want. You've got to have heat. If you put it in shade, you tuck it in the garden somewhere, it's got cool leaves, it'll look fine, but you're not probably going to get a whole lot of figs off it. I want something south, and I want every bit of heat I can have. I think the best ones I've seen, say you've got the 2-story house or 1-story house, and you've got that side that faces south, and you're looking for a tree kind of off the property, even reflected heat off a structure like that will help as well. We carry a lot of varieties. I don't know that I want to get into talking about 10 different varieties, but you probably could look online and see plenty of options. Some figs will be zone 6, the vast majority are zone 7. I don't have an issue with hardiness on any of those. If we get a bad winter and it's young, yes, maybe it kills some wood back. You prune it, spring, up it shoots again. Figs grow like weeds. I've seen some pretty big figs. Up until last year, I would have said there's no option for a smaller fig. You buy a brown turkey, a Desert King, a Peter's Honey, Chicago Hardy, whatever variety you like. It's going to get 15, 20 feet tall, and we're going to have a big tree out of it. There are some really good dwarfs out there. A Little Ruby came out last year. We'll have that again come springtime. And I got to chuckle as I say it, but Little Miss Figgy is the other new one that's coming out this year. And if you can plant a Little Miss Figgy, more power to you. That just kind of makes me chuckle to say that one. You can grow those in pots even. So if I have a small garden, a pot, somewhere sunny, I can get a 6-8 foot plant out of that versus getting any of the other ones are going to get pretty big because there's no dwarf rootstock to graft figs on. We're all on our own root with that regard. Typically figs will get 2 crops up here if we have a decent summer, midsummer. If we have not get too cold too early, a lot of times you'll have something to pick in the fall as well. Just keep in mind the production's happening on 1-year-old wood. So if I go out in the winter, structure issues, I prune, open it up for light, whatever you want to do. But if I get in the habit of just cutting it back every year to keep it small, you're going to probably greatly reduce your production long term. Okay. Does that help? I hope.
Yeah, definitely. What about almond trees?
Yep. I love nuts, and my, I don't know if my dad's listening to this, but he'll probably chuckle if he is. But my dad is the almond master. He's got 2. We carry Hall's Hardy Almond is the only one we do up here. He's got 2 of them at his place. He's had for years now, and he gets buckets of almonds out of them. It's in the cherry family. So to me, the almond discussion is exactly the discussion we had on cherries. We bloom. I have to watch a little bit of blossom blight, perhaps if it's really wet. I don't spray. Bees, they're so fertile. We don't have to worry about getting 2 different almonds. So I put a Hall's Hardy in, let the mason bees, the right answer there, do their thing. I'm going to have great nut production that I can pop off or let drop in the fall. He typically will take them in, put them in the dryer, add some spice, seasoning, whatever you want to do, crack them open, and you got your own almonds.
Nice. That sounds fun. I like the idea of being able to just go right out in your backyard and pick whatever you want. Eat it fresh.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's pretty great.
We can only have citrus here. We're too cold for that, though, right?
Yeah. Well, maybe somebody somewhere's working on it for us.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah. So we've had some questions about growing fruit trees in pots. People have less space than they usually do in their yards. Are there certain kind of rules in terms of a certain size that can go in pots? How long? Any kind of tips or general advice?
Well, let's start with this. If we're going to grow anything I'm going to talk about here in a second in a pot, I'm looking at like a whiskey barrel, half whiskey barrel, something 3 feet across, couple feet deep. We're not going to have luck growing in a little small pot long term. So, you can start with that, move it to a half barrel size down the road, fine. But we need room to anchor those trees. So it's not going to be a little, decorative pot on the porch more than a year or two. It's going to root out. And we're going to have to go bigger. Now, if you were going to make your life easy, I can't say it without laughing, but I just mentioned Little Miss Figgy, Miss Ruby. Those are 2 dwarf figs that would be great for pots. The bush cherries I mentioned were a really popular choice here for a number of years. If I, again, had a half whiskey barrel-ish type pot long term, I could have Romeo, Juliet, Carmen Jewel, Crimson Passion. Some of those sweet cherries or sweet and sour cherries are great in pots. The other one I would say would be the mini dwarf apple. Okay. Mini dwarf rootstock apple. I think you're okay doing that in a whiskey barrel pot for a long time. Again, you could start with something a little smaller and then move it up one time. The other thing, which again is not quite here yet, you can access our fruit list on our website as things come in or leave your name, would be the columnar type apple. So if I want to get into growing an apple that's going to go up like a pole and not spread so much, typically a lot of those varieties that we do carry, Golden Sentinel, Scarlet Sentinel, North Pole, Tangy Green, there's Tasty Red, there's a bunch of them we get in. Those would probably last a substantial long time in a container as well.
Awesome. Good tips. Cause we all have more space for
Yep.
containers sometimes than actual yard space. So
There you go.
looping back to the almonds real quick, there was a question about are almonds water, like do they need a lot of water, or is that just a rumor? Are they like
No, I mean,
of
I wouldn't say any more than any other type of fruit we're talking about. To me, it's the same thing. I mean, in our specific climate where we're so wet, fall, winter, spring, I don't think you're ever going to have to do much irrigation on it except in the summer. If I want to keep my crop happy and maximize my production, it's a good soaking every once in a while during that June, July, August time frame. Watching the weather. I mean, who knows what up here we kind of get thrown a little bit of everything. But I want to make sure all fruit, not just the almond, doesn't need to be soaked all summer, but I cannot let it get drought stressed. Because again, if I drought stress my almond, first thing it's going to do is drop all of its nuts that are developing, then the foliage, and then go dormant. So try, if you're talking about a new one, again, not knowing your specific soil is always hard. But if it was me, I feed it, I mulch it really well around the root zone. It's probably a twice a week, kind of thing. Maybe on your first year or two, then it's once a week. Maybe 5, 6, 7 years go by, and I'm only out there once a month, maybe twice a month, giving it a really good soaking to keep it happy through those dry summer months.
Here's kind of an interesting, do you consider olives to be fruit trees or more in like the berry family? When are we talking about those, and how do you go about growing those?
Well, olives, that's a great question. I typically bring up olives with our berry class, but let's do it today. It's a fruit, really, right? I'll be honest. My mom and dad live right on the water, so she's got the advantage of really never getting super cold. To worry about damage in the wintertime. I don't know that olive is the safest choice for the vast majority of gardeners, especially the farther east you're going up into the foothills. The hardiest olives are going to be right at that, 10 to 20 degree range. We got colder than that here for a good week and a half after Christmas. So if you had an olive, you're probably going to be pruning it back and kind of letting it reflush. I hope it lives for you. It's on the hardy line. Let's leave it at that for now. Again, sun is all about that. I mean, that's a tree that would need sun. My mom keeps hers in a pot for a number of years now. We will have some in. We typically get some of the hardier type almonds. I try to stay away from the zone 8, zone 9, and the 7 to 8 range. Arbequina is one that comes to mind. We'll have some in bush form and little trees. You would get olives on them, I'm sure, at some point, but I don't know. Maybe if I was to give you some advice and you want to try one, I would get a really good sized container and keep it in that for a few years. Let it develop. You saw, the snowmageddon coming the day after Christmas here this year as an example. Sweet, let me just get my hand truck and move that pot into a sheltered spot in my garage for the week or out of the weather. I can get some girth to it, get it developed. Now maybe I can move it out in my landscape and have a little bit hardier tree long term. Maybe that might be a way to think of it. Keep in mind, olive, actually filbert's another one. I didn't use this word, but those are wind pollinated. So I don't need to worry about, the olive and do I have another one and all the rest of this. Filbert nuts are the same way. Mother Nature takes care of pollination for that simply with a nice little breeze, just blows the pollen in the air and gets on the next one, so I don't have to plant a specific second variety.
So speaking of changing weather, we're still in the beginning months, and that there could be some colder weather on the horizon for us. Is there anything we need to worry about? Can we plant fruit trees now? Do we need to worry about anything that could be coming up and how to take care of them?
Yeah, I wouldn't worry about anything planting. We've got them all in pots here. You take it home. It's always going to be safer in the ground. I mentioned maybe, taking a bare root tree home and not leaving it in the garage for a week. If you do take it home and lay it on the ground and I bury it in soil, maybe I worry a little bit more about that sitting for a length of time and it is super cold. If you can, dig the hole, get it in the ground, get your amendments in there, feed it, mulch it. He's going to be happy sitting there right away.
Cool. Good to know. Because you never know what the weather's going to do, right? So as long as
Exactly.
you're protected and safe, that's always good news. We answered a lot of questions today. I think we got them all. We covered a lot of ground. As always, we record these. So you can go back, slow it down, pause, rewind, whatever you need to get all the information you want. And reach out. As always, we're here to help with whatever questions you've got. We want to say thank you again to the Everett Clinic and congratulations to Jim, Judy, Bob, Esther, and Lori. I let you know if you were with, text to you, a chat. So if you're one of those, congratulations. If you're not, we apologize. There's another chance next weekend at the Berry class. We're really fortunate to have to have this great partnership with the Everett Clinic. They're going to sponsor pretty much a class once a month with us. So they're all up on our website, well, as we kind of release our classes for this year. So check them out. Check out the Everett Clinic. They're a wonderful stable community business here. We really are grateful to be partnered with them and grateful that they get to give back to you, our wonderful customers as well. So our fruit tree page is up on our website. If you want to check out any of the pictures or some more detail on some of the varieties that Trevor talked about, check it out on our website, Fruit Trees page. You can find it pretty easily. And as always, thank you for joining us. We hope to see you back again a week and a half or 2 weeks, right? The February 12th and 13th.
Yep, 2 weeks.
Berries and roses. So thanks so much, everyone, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Stay safe out there. And remember, especially with bare root, leaves up, roots go down. All right, enjoy the day.